Well, I was born in Manhattan. And I was born in Manhattan, and by 5 years old, I was brought into the Bronx. So I was raised in the Bronx, and lived there a good part of my life, you know, until approximately 19 to 20 years old. And a part of all that culture that was coming out of there, I'm certainly a part of it, of course. Well, I just saw, you know, even within my own family, you know, my older brother Charlie playing piano, for example, and my uncles all sang and played guitars, and I was involved in the music world in a very early age, and then playing a lot of stickball, you know, in the Bronx, and being athletic with my friends that I was being raised with, you know, at that time. So it was something that certainly, and at the same time we had the Puerto Ricans that were already living on the block, next to the blacks that were also in the same block down further. As a matter of fact, the ex-President, Secretary of State, Colin Powell, was raised also in the neighborhood. And all the musicians that were in different orchestras, a lot of them were coming out of the Bronx, that were playing with the major orchestras like Machito, Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, for example. I've been influenced by the two genres of music, because being born and raised in New York, and at the same time making it my business to learn the genre of the dance genre. At that time, the orchestras were very, very popular. My brother Charlie Palmieri was with Tito Puente for a certain amount of years. So, and I'm 11 years old, for example, and I'm listening to the recordings that were coming out of the orchestras in New York, for example. And at the same time, the pop, you know, that was going on at the time, of the pop music and the hit parade, and that all this was happening at the same time. So the fusion and the jazz elements that were being played also, all that made an influence certainly on not only me but everybody else, but particularly on me, like that later on it helped me within how I structure my music. The artist that influenced me the most, I would have to say, started with, again, my brother Charlie Palmieri, you know, him being the pianist that he was, and the teacher that he would recommend me to, and then the orchestra that he would recommend me to, the orchestra that he played with. And the biggest orchestra, and actually the large orchestra, was Machito y su Afro-Cubans, and in there were the great pianist and arranger called René Hernandez. So he was someone I admired very, very much, and loved the way he arranged and played. The Tito Puente conjunto and the Tito playing timbales, which was something that I wanted to play also, or that I had in my heart to play timbales and play drums. I wanted to be my brother's drummer, for example. And the form of the conjunto form that Tito Rodriguez had, the way he sang, that eventually I worked with his orchestra for 2 years later on. Warner Brothers, that was my first Latin jazz attempt, and that orchestra that I had was the one that I presented to the host committee of NARAS, and we were able to achieve to get the category of Latin jazz. If you didn't have Latin jazz, they would put us in the jazz category, and the jazz category was already covered by the jazz artists. And you're not going to be able to compete whatever instrument you play. You know, if you play piano, you're going to compete against, just to use it, a pianist in the jazz, or two, Herbie Hancock or Chick Corea, and that wasn't going to work. You know, and if you know anything about the voting in the NARAS, if you have 200 CDs that come into the category of jazz, for example, after the first vote, you know, there's 195 that are eliminated. And you're certainly not going to be able to compete with the jazz artists in their own genre in their category. So we needed the Latin jazz. And now it's incredible because in the Latin jazz category, the jazz musician has been recording and winning in our category too. My greatest achievement would be the recognition that you receive from your peers, and I have been very well respected to that degree, and that I take as a tremendous honor. And also in 1975, there was, when we were allowed into the category of NARIS, of the Grammys, I win the Grammy, and that Grammy was only one Grammy representing all of the artists in the world, all the musical genres of Latin in the world, which is quite absurd but true, because it took 17 years for them to put us into category. So eventually, throughout the years, then eventually I become a governor at the NARIS, and then I was quite instrumental to bring in the category of Latin jazz, which was very, very much needed. And I feel that that was a great a form of an accomplishment.